The sun had barely risen over Bagram Air Base, casting a pale orange glow across the dusty expanse of the Afghan desert. Dust swirled lazily in the morning breeze, glinting like tiny sparks in the weak sunlight. In the midst of this vast, desolate landscape, Sergeant Emily Carter walked toward the motor pool, her boots kicking up small clouds of sand. She was a mechanic, but not just any mechanic. She had a reputation for solving problems no one else could, keeping vehicles that carried soldiers to their missions alive, often under impossible circumstances. Emily was petite, with a sharp, determined face and hair tied back in a tight braid, practical and unassuming. Her uniform was spotless, a testament to her attention to detail, though her hands bore the marks of her work: grease stains, calluses, and small burns from soldering. She moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the rows of vehicles, like a conductor assessing an orchestra, noting every scratch, dent, or oil leak. The trucks, Humvees, and MRIPs lined up like silent sentinels, their engines humming softly after the early morning checks. "Morning, Emily," called out Corporal Jenkins, a young soldier assigned to assist the mechanics. He waved a greasy rag, and his grin was bright despite the early hour. "You're here early again." "Morning," Emily replied, her voice calm but clipped. "And yes, I'd like to know the fleet is ready before anyone even thinks about hitting the road." She crouched beside a Humvee, inspecting the suspension. "You ever notice how a truck can whisper to you if you just know how to listen?" Jenkins laughed nervously. "I just hope they don't whisper too loud and explode on us." Emily's smile was brief, tinged with a hint of sadness. "I'll make sure they don't. That's the plan." The words weren't just about trucks. They carried a weight Emily had been living with since losing her younger brother, Daniel, in a roadside ambush 2 years prior. Daniel had been a soldier on the front lines, brave and reckless in equal measure. His death had carved a hollow ache in her heart, one that she carried into every wrench turn and engine repair. She had promised herself, silently, fiercely, that no one else she cared about would die if she could prevent it. The base was slowly stirring. Soldiers jogged past, gear clanking and radios buzzing, while others gathered around tables, discussing logistics and the day's convoy plans. Emily felt the familiar mix of pride and invisibility. She was respected by her peers in the motor pool, but the combat soldiers barely noticed her beyond her title. A mechanic's work, no matter how vital, was rarely celebrated. Yet she didn't need celebration. She only needed to know that the vehicles leaving her hands were safe, that every mission had a better chance of returning because she had done her job. She moved from vehicle to vehicle, checking oil levels, tightening bolts, and running through her checklist with a practiced eye. Each vehicle was a puzzle, and she thrived on solving them. It wasn't glamorous. There were no medals for replacing a spark plug or resecuring a fuel line. But the satisfaction of knowing a convoy would make it back in one piece, of knowing lives were indirectly safeguarded through her efforts, was worth every sleepless night and blistered hand. By mid-morning, the sun was high, and the heat began to press down on the base. Emily wiped sweat from her brow and adjusted her gloves, focusing on a Humvee that had been acting up during the previous mission. The engine was sputtering slightly, a minor issue for most mechanics, but Emily noticed the irregular vibrations, a subtle but dangerous misalignment in the transmission. Kneeling beside it, she murmured to herself, "Come on, tell me what's wrong." Her hands moved deftly, removing the panel and examining the components with a combination of intuition and experience. While she worked, her mind wandered to the convoy scheduled to depart later that day. Captain Ryan Morales, the commanding officer of the squad that would be using this Humvee, was efficient and respected, but notoriously strict. Emily had noticed he rarely stopped by the motor pool unless a serious issue arose. That wasn't a problem. She preferred it that way. Recognition wasn't necessary for her work. Efficiency and safety were. Still, she couldn't shake a nagging feeling that today was different. Something in the base's atmosphere felt off. A subtle tension in the chatter of soldiers, the hurried steps of logistics staff, the unusual maintenance requests that had been popping up all morning. Emily paused and ran her fingers over a panel she had just repaired. Her instincts told her to double-check the wiring harnesses. Too many coincidences, she muttered. She stood, surveying the fleet with sharp eyes, noting slight irregularities, a fuel cap that wasn't properly secured, a battery cable that seemed tampered with. None of it made sense unless someone had been careless. Or worse, deliberate. Her chest tightened. Before she could dwell on it, Jenkins appeared again, holding a wrench like a nervous talisman. "Sergeant, the captain's coming by to inspect the convoy," he said. Emily nodded, finishing the last check on the Humvee. She knew Morales would trust her expertise, even if he didn't always express it. Moments later, the captain approached, walking briskly with a clipboard in hand. "Carter," he said, his tone businesslike but respectful. "How's our fleet today?" Emily wiped her hands and straightened. "All vehicles are prepped and mission ready. One Humvee had a minor transmission issue, but it's been corrected. No further problems detected." Morales glanced at the vehicle, then back at her. "Good work. I don't need any surprises out there." His gaze softened slightly. "Keep it this way." Emily nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. For her, no surprises meant life or death, and she would do everything in her power to ensure that promise. As Morales walked away, Emily returned to the Humvee, kneeling beside it once more. Her hands lingered on the engine, almost reverently. She whispered a silent vow, one that had become a ritual since Daniel's death. "I won't let them down. Not today. Not ever." The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the motor pool. Emily's hands moved expertly, her mind alert, her instincts honed. She didn't yet know that today would test everything she knew about courage, quick thinking, and responsibility. Today, the life she had quietly been preparing for, the life of vigilance and silent heroism, was about to collide with danger in a way she never expected. And Emily Carter, the quiet mechanic, the unseen guardian of her squad, would soon discover that sometimes the smallest actions could determine who lived and who died. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Bagram Air Base, turning the dust into a shimmering haze. Emily Carter moved methodically through the motor pool, wiping sweat from her brow as she examined a convoy of Humvees lined up for the next mission. The vehicles gleamed under the harsh sunlight, but Emily's practiced eye didn't just see paint and metal. She saw potential danger, the subtle hints that something was wrong. For days now, she had noticed anomalies that didn't add up. Fuel lines slightly misaligned, spare parts missing, and minor wiring errors that, while subtle, could have catastrophic consequences. Most of these discrepancies would be attributed to simple human error, but Emily's instincts screamed otherwise. Someone was tampering with the equipment, deliberately. "Sergeant Carter?" Jenkins' voice broke through her concentration. He held a checklist, his hands shaking slightly. I don't mean to sound paranoid, but did you notice anything odd with the convoy today?" Emily glanced up at him, her eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" He shifted nervously. "Fuel trucks. Some of them had new wiring, or wiring that looks weird. And the MRAPs, the logs don't match the maintenance schedule. It's like someone's been messing with them after hours." Emily's stomach tightened. She had suspected as much, but hearing Jenkins verbalize it made it real. She nodded slowly. "I noticed some discrepancies too," she said. "I double-checked the engine harnesses this morning. Everything seemed fine. Until now. Keep an eye on it." Don't touch anything until I look at it. Jenkins hesitated. Do you think it's sabotage? Emily didn't answer immediately. She let her gaze drift over the convoy, letting her instincts guide her. She had seen enough in her years at the base to know the signs when something was off. Maybe, she said finally. And if it is, we need to find out who before someone gets hurt. The base was a hive of activity. Soldiers moved purposefully between vehicles and buildings. Radios crackled with static, and the hum of generators filled the air. But beneath the routine, Emily sensed a tension that she couldn't ignore. Something was brewing, a storm of danger that no one else seemed to notice. Her mind flashed back to her brother, Daniel. The memory of him, smiling before a mission, haunted her. She remembered the pang of helplessness she felt when she got the news of his death, how she had vowed that no one else she cared about would face the same fate. That memory now fueled her determination. She could feel it in her veins, a quiet, burning resolve. She wouldn't let fear paralyze her. She had to act. Emily began a covert inspection, moving from truck to truck, carefully noting irregularities. She crouched by a Humvee's engine, her hands skimming over the wires. Something wasn't right. A fuse had been replaced, but not properly. The wiring looked too new, almost polished, as if someone had hurriedly installed it. Her brow furrowed. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. It wasn't a mistake. She worked quickly, making mental notes and snapping photographs with her phone, careful not to disturb anything. As she moved to the next vehicle, she noticed the fuel truck parked near the convoy. Its fuel cap was loose, and there were scratches around the lock, as if someone had forced it open. Emily's heart pounded. Every anomaly she found seemed to confirm her worst fears. The base had been infiltrated, and the saboteur was among them. Emily paused, taking a deep breath. She couldn't alert the entire base yet. Doing so would cause panic, and the perpetrator would have time to cover their tracks. She needed proof. She needed to catch them in the act. But that meant staying vigilant, watching, waiting, and acting when the moment was right. By mid-afternoon, the tension on the base had grown almost palpable. Soldiers were preparing for the convoy's departure, checking their gear and running final mission drills. Emily moved stealthily among the vehicles, her keen eyes catching every small movement. A shadow flickered near one of the fuel trucks. She froze, watching closely. A man in civilian contractor gear appeared briefly, fiddling with a panel before retreating into the shadows. Her pulse quickened. She knew she had seen enough. Whoever it was, they had access to critical areas and were deliberately tampering with the equipment. Emily's mind raced. If the convoy left without addressing these threats, dozens of lives could be lost. She needed to act, but she also needed help. Her training in mechanics and her experience with military equipment gave her confidence. She knew she could identify and neutralize threats, if she had the chance. But first, she had to gather evidence without alerting the saboteur. Emily made her way to the security office, pretending to check vehicle logs. She discreetly downloaded surveillance footage from the cameras overlooking the motor pool. Her hands shook slightly as she watched the feed, pausing on the blurry figure she had seen earlier. The movements were deliberate, calculated, not a soldier, not a mechanic. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the base. Emily retreated to the motor pool, keeping an eye on the vehicles. She knew the convoy was scheduled to leave soon, and she had no time to lose. Every moment counted. Her mind raced with possibilities, scenarios in which a single misstep could result in disaster. She crouched beside the Humvee she had repaired earlier, her fingers tracing the wiring. Her instincts screamed that time was running out. "Not today," she whispered, almost to herself. "Not on my watch." A sudden commotion drew her attention. Captain Morales walking briskly toward her, clipboard in hand. "Carter," he called, his tone brisk. "Any issues with the convoy?" Emily straightened, her eyes meeting his. "Sir, there are discrepancies in the maintenance logs. Fuel trucks and some of the Humvees have irregular wiring and tampered parts. I suspect sabotage." Morales frowned. "Sabotage? You're sure?" "We can't jump to conclusions. I've seen it myself, sir." "It's deliberate," Emily insisted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her body. "If we don't check these vehicles, people could get hurt." The captain studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right. Let's investigate, but keep it contained. I don't want unnecessary panic spreading across the base." Emily nodded, knowing she had bought precious time. As Morales walked away, she returned to the Humvee, her heart still racing. She was just a mechanic, a role often overlooked. But today, her knowledge and intuition were about to become the line between life and death. She took a deep breath, scanning the convoy. The shadows were lengthening, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. Every movement, every vehicle, every creak and click seemed amplified in the tense silence. Emily knew that the danger was real and imminent. And deep down, she realized that she was the only one standing between her squad and disaster. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the desert sky in shades of red and gold, Emily prepared herself. The quiet determination in her heart hardened into resolve. Tonight, she would uncover the truth. Tonight, she would protect the lives of those who trusted her, even if it meant risking her own. The whispers of danger had grown louder, and Emily Carter, the quiet mechanic, felt the first stirrings of a battle she hadn't expected to fight. A battle that would test every ounce of her courage, skill, and determination. The convoy was scheduled to leave at dawn, and Emily would be ready. The desert night settled over Bagram Air Base like a heavy blanket, the heat of the day giving way to a dry, bone-chilling cold. Emily Carter moved silently among the convoy vehicles, flashlight in hand, heart pounding as the faint hum of generators echoed across the motor pool. The air smelled of diesel, grease, and something Emily couldn't quite identify, an underlying tension that made her pulse quicken. The anomalies she had noticed earlier that day hadn't disappeared. In fact, they felt sharper, more deliberate in the darkness. She crouched beside the lead Humvee, the same one she had repaired that morning, and ran her gloved fingers over the engine harnesses. Her instincts, honed over years of mechanical work, screamed that something was terribly wrong. And then she saw it. A thin wire, barely noticeable, snaking into the engine bay, its end disappearing beneath the metal cover. Emily froze, her breath catching. She recognized the signs immediately. This wasn't just a malfunction or sloppy work. It was a trigger. A bomb. Her mind raced as adrenaline surged through her veins. She knew the convoy was scheduled to depart at first light. Any second wasted could cost lives. Her hands shook slightly, but her training took over. She crouched low, flashlight steady, examining the wiring and the detonator hidden beneath a panel. Every decision mattered. One wrong move could ignite it. "Not today," she whispered, a mantra she had repeated silently for years. She could still remember her brother Daniel's smile before his last mission, the way he had trusted her family's promise to keep others safe. She owed him, and the soldiers relying on these vehicles, nothing less than her absolute focus. Emily carefully traced the wires, noting their connection to the fuel line and ignition system. Whoever had planted this device knew exactly what they were doing. It was sophisticated, designed to detonate once the convoy hit a certain speed. Her stomach tightened. This was no random act of sabotage. This was targeted, a calculated attack meant to kill as many soldiers as possible. Her hands moved with precision, cutting and rerouting wires, inspecting the detonator for secondary triggers. Every nerve in her body screamed danger, but she stayed calm. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Seconds stretched into minutes as she worked methodically, mentally rehearsing the steps that would keep the device from triggering. She glanced around the motor pool. Shadows loomed, flickering as her flashlight caught their edges. The quiet night made every sound, a distant footstep, the clink of a tool, feel amplified. She had to act fast, but stealthily. If anyone, especially the saboteur, realized she had discovered the device, they could make a fatal mistake or flee before evidence could be gathered. Emily's training in both mechanical systems and military protocol kicked in. She worked like a surgeon, dismantling the trigger mechanism while keeping every connection stable. Sweat ran down her forehead, her gloves slick with oil and grease, but she didn't pause. Every heartbeat was a countdown. The convoy's lives were literally in her hands. A sudden noise made her freeze. From the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow shift near the fuel trucks. Someone was moving stealthily? A guard? No, too deliberate, too calculated. Emily's heart jumped, but she focused on her task. Whoever it was hadn't noticed her yet. She had seconds, maybe less, to finish the disarming before she could deal with the potential threat. With a final careful snip of a wire and the removal of a tiny detonator, the Humvee's engine bay was safe. Emily exhaled slowly, relief and tension mingling in her chest. She had just prevented a catastrophic explosion and likely saved the lives of the entire convoy. The gravity of it hit her like a punch. She had acted alone, under the cover of darkness, without hesitation. She was a mechanic, yes, but tonight her courage had made her a guardian of life. But there was no time to celebrate. Her mind immediately turned to the larger picture. This device wasn't an isolated incident. The anomalies she had observed earlier, the suspicious wiring, the missing parts, they all pointed to a coordinated effort. Someone on base was working against them. And if she thought this was over, she was wrong. Emily moved quickly to inspect the next vehicle. Her flashlight revealed similar irregularities, wiring out of place, components that had been tampered with subtly. Someone was clearly targeting the convoy systematically. Panic tried to creep into her thoughts, but she pushed it aside. She had the knowledge, the tools, and the willpower to act. One vehicle at a time, she could neutralize the threat. She crouched under the second truck, carefully lifting panels and tracing wires. Each discovery heightened the tension. Another detonator, rigged to ignite with speed or vibration. Her hands worked tirelessly, cutting connections, securing fuel lines, and disarming triggers. Minutes passed like hours. Sweat and grime coated her skin, but Emily didn't falter. She couldn't. The lives of her squad mates, some of whom didn't even know her, depended on her focus. Finally, she moved to the last vehicle in the convoy, her pulse hammering in her ears. The shadows seemed thicker here, almost pressing in. Emily's flashlight beam caught the faint glint of another wire tucked beneath the engine. Her stomach sank. This one was more complex, multiple triggers interlinked, a dead man switch that could activate if disturbed incorrectly. Her mind raced through possibilities, calculations of voltages, trigger mechanisms, and fail-safes. The saboteur had clearly expected someone to try disarming this remotely, but they hadn't counted on Emily's knowledge and instinct. Her fingers, steady despite exhaustion, traced each wire, testing each connection. Seconds passed like lifetimes. Finally, with a decisive motion, she disconnected the triggers and secured the wiring. The last detonator was rendered harmless. Emily slowly sat back, breathing heavily, sweat stinging her eyes. She had done it. The convoy was safe, for now. The magnitude of what she had accomplished began to sink in. She had prevented a massacre. She had acted when no one else had realized the danger. But Emily knew the night was far from over. This was only the first act in a much larger plot. Someone on base had been planning this for weeks, if not months. The precision, the access, the confidence, all indicated a calculated, dangerous mind at work. And the saboteur was still out there, watching, waiting, perhaps even planning the next move. As dawn approached, Emily cleaned her hands on her uniform, her body exhausted but her mind sharp. She took one last look at the convoy, ensuring every vehicle was safe. The sun began to rise over the mountains, casting long shadows across the base. Soldiers would soon arrive, unaware of the disaster that had been narrowly averted. Emily stood, her eyes scanning the horizon. She felt a mix of relief, fear, and determination. She had acted alone, and no one outside the motor pool knew the full extent of the danger she had prevented. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. The saboteur would strike again, and when they did, she would be ready. For now, though, she allowed herself a brief moment of quiet triumph. She had done her job, but more importantly, she had kept people alive. And in the world of Bagram Air Base, that was worth more than any medal, any recognition, or any praise. Emily Carter, the quiet mechanic, had stepped into a role far greater than she had ever imagined, and the war she didn't expect to fight had only just begun. The sun had barely touched the horizon, casting a soft, pale light over Bagram Air Base. The morning was deceptively calm, with soldiers moving briskly across the dusty terrain, unaware of the near disaster that had been averted the night before. Emily Carter moved quietly through the motor pool, her mind still racing from the discoveries of the previous night. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders, heavier than any toolbox she had ever carried. Though the vehicles were now technically safe, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't over. Every anomaly she had uncovered, every wire she had cut, was a piece of a larger, more sinister puzzle. Someone with knowledge of the base, someone with access to restricted areas, was deliberately sabotaging the convoy system. The thought chilled her. This was no random act. It was calculated, precise, and intended to harm. Captain Ryan Morales appeared from the far side of the motor pool, his silhouette sharp against the rising sun. "Sergeant Carter," he called, approaching with measured steps. "Your work last night. Impressive. You prevented a disaster." Emily straightened, brushing her hands on her uniform. "Thank you, sir. But this isn't over. Whoever did this has access to multiple vehicles. I believe they're still here, on base." Morales frowned, his expression tightening. "Do you have proof?" "I have patterns," Emily replied, her tone steady. "Fuel trucks, Humvees, MRAPs, all tampered with in a similar fashion. The anomalies point to someone with inside access, someone who knows the schedules and the missions." She paused, watching him carefully. "If we don't identify them, the next convoy could be deadly." The captain nodded slowly. "I'll authorize an investigation, but keep it contained. Panic will only make things worse." Emily left him with a nod and moved to a quieter corner of the motor pool, her mind already calculating her next steps. She couldn't wait for a formal investigation. She needed evidence now. She needed proof before anyone else was hurt. Her training as a mechanic gave her access to vehicles and tools, but now she needed to act like a detective, piecing together clues that might lead her to the saboteur. She returned to the vehicles she had inspected the night before, crouching beside the first Humvee. Her hands skimmed over the wiring, looking for anything she might have missed. Every detail mattered: a scratch, a replacement part, a loose bolt. Emily took notes meticulously, documenting each irregularity. She also reviewed the maintenance logs, cross-referencing times, vehicle assignments, and personnel access. The more she analyzed, the clearer the pattern became. Someone on the base was deliberately targeting specific vehicles, and the timing of the tampering suggested inside knowledge. Emily's heart sank. The saboteur could be anyone, a contractor, a soldier, even someone she worked alongside daily. Trust, once solid, now felt fragile. That night, she moved through the motor pool under the cover of darkness, flashlight in hand, examining vehicles again. The shadows were long and ominous, the faint hum of generators a constant background to her tense movements. She paused at a fuel truck, noting the scratches on the cap and the slight misalignment of the locking mechanism. Someone had been here recently. She wasn't imagining it. The saboteur was still active. Emily's thoughts returned to the night before. The precision of the devices, the calculated nature of the sabotage, indicated a mind that was familiar with both machinery and military operations. Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing. And that meant they weren't just dangerous. They were smart, cunning, and patient. Her investigation led her to the security office, where she accessed surveillance footage from cameras around the motor pool. Emily studied the grainy video, eyes narrowing as she fast-forwarded and rewound the footage. Hours of motion, of soldiers and vehicles, passed before she caught it. A figure, moving stealthily among the trucks, appearing at odd hours, checking panels and manipulating equipment. The silhouette was brief, almost imperceptible, but Emily recognized the gait, the posture, the familiarity with the vehicles. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't a contractor or a new soldier. This was someone who had been there for months, someone trusted, someone she had worked alongside countless times. Betrayal hit her like a physical blow. She had trusted her colleagues implicitly. Now, one of them was the very person plotting to kill the soldiers she silently vowed to protect. Emily leaned back, her mind racing. She needed to act carefully. Confronting the saboteur directly could trigger them to accelerate their plan or even retaliate. But she couldn't stay idle. Too many lives depended on her vigilance. She decided to create a plan, quietly, methodically, without raising suspicion. She would gather evidence, document patterns, and catch the person in the act. Over the next few nights, Emily conducted a secret investigation. She moved through the motor pool in the dark, her flashlight occasionally catching reflections off polished metal. Every creak of a vehicle, every distant footstep, set her nerves on edge. She recorded anomalies, logged suspicious activity, and pieced together the network of tampered vehicles. Her expertise as a mechanic became a tool for observation. She knew exactly what to look for, where to look, and how to detect interference. One night, as she crouched beside a Humvee inspecting wiring, a shadow flickered across her peripheral vision. Emily froze, holding her breath. Someone was moving among the vehicles, deliberate, cautious, familiar. She stayed perfectly still, letting the figure pass without noticing her. Her heart raced, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Whoever it was, they had almost discovered her presence. By dawn, Emily had gathered enough evidence to confirm her fears. The sabotage was systematic, deliberate, and coming from someone with full access to the base's critical areas. She shared her findings with Jenkins, who looked pale and shaken. "Do you really think it's someone here?" he whispered. Emily nodded grimly. "I know it is. And if we don't stop them, the next mission won't come back intact." Her resolve hardened. She couldn't rely solely on the chain of command. She would need to act on her own. The shadow in the footage, the deliberate tampering, the precision of the devices, it all pointed to someone calculated and patient. Someone dangerous. Emily knew she was now in a silent race against time. The next convoy was scheduled to depart soon, and if she didn't uncover the saboteur before then, lives would be lost. She felt a familiar surge of determination, the same fire that had driven her to become the meticulous, unflinching mechanic she was. She would find the person responsible. She would stop them. And she would protect every soldier who trusted the convoy, no matter the cost. The base stirred with activity as dawn approached, unaware of the quiet, relentless investigation unfolding in its shadows. Emily crouched beside the Humvee one last time, her hands steady despite exhaustion. She whispered a silent promise. "I won't fail. Not this time." She didn't yet know the identity of the saboteur, or the lengths they would go to cover their tracks. But Emily Carter, the quiet mechanic who had always worked behind the scenes, had become the first and last line of defense. And as she rose to her feet, flashlight in hand, she knew the coming days would test her courage, ingenuity, and resolve in ways she had never imagined. Tonight, Emily would continue her vigil, and when the saboteur made their next move, she would be ready. The night air was thick with tension over Bagram Air Base, the desert quiet except for the distant hum of generators and the occasional clatter of boots on metal. Emily Carter moved swiftly and silently through the motor pool, her flashlight cutting swaths through the darkness. Her eyes scanned every vehicle, every shadow, every glint of metal. Weeks of anomalies, tampered vehicles, and suspicious activity had led her here, to the moment where she would uncover the saboteur. Her investigation had been meticulous, her notes detailed. Logs checked, surveillance footage analyzed, patterns mapped out. Emily knew that the threat wasn't a stranger, a contractor, or some unknown infiltrator. No, the saboteur was one of them, someone with clearance, access, and knowledge. And as she crouched beneath the glow of her flashlight, comparing the wiring anomalies from previous nights, her heart sank. The evidence was undeniable. Every tampered vehicle traced back to specific movements and permissions. And when she cross-referenced the personnel records, the name that appeared repeatedly sent a chill down her spine. Sergeant Blake, a trusted supply officer who had worked alongside her for months. Someone Emily had often collaborated with, joked with, and depended upon. Her breath caught. Betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing on her chest. Blake had access to the motor pool, the convoy schedules, and critical areas of the base. He had been manipulating vehicles, planting devices, and feeding information to insurgents, all while hiding behind a mask of professionalism and camaraderie. Emily felt anger surge through her veins, mingled with fear. She had to stop him, and fast. Emily didn't rush. She needed proof before making a move. Acting rashly could alert Blake, giving him a chance to escape or accelerate his plan. She returned to the motor pool, moving under cover of darkness, flashlight in hand, and carefully retraced her steps from the previous nights. Her hands hovered over the panels of the Humvees and MRAPs, checking for subtle signs of tampering that only someone with her experience could detect. As she worked, a shadow moved in the corner of her eye. Emily froze, holding her breath. Blake stepped out from behind a fuel truck, his movements deliberate, confident, almost casual. His eyes scanned the convoy, but they didn't see her yet. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears. She had been discovered, or at least she knew he was active. She ducked low, crouching behind a Humvee, watching him. Every instinct screened danger. This wasn't just sabotage. It was targeted, precise, and planned. Blake had intended to strike again, likely during the convoy scheduled to depart at first light. Emily's mind raced. The soldiers were relying on her vigilance. If she didn't act, lives would be lost. But confronting him directly was too dangerous. Blake was armed, trained, and likely expected someone to challenge him. Emily had to be clever. She needed leverage, evidence, and a way to neutralize the threat without being discovered. Her eyes flicked to her toolkit. Wrenches, wire cutters, and even her smartphone with the downloaded surveillance footage. These were her weapons now. Emily took a deep breath, steadying her shaking hands. She couldn't afford panic or hesitation. She slowly began documenting Blake's movements, capturing photos and recording notes. Every small motion, every step he took around the vehicles, would become critical evidence. She moved silently, blending with the shadows, using her knowledge of the motor pool layout to stay unseen. Minutes felt like hours as she watched him manipulate another vehicle. Her stomach twisted with the realization he was preparing it to detonate once the convoy began its journey. If the mission left the base without intervention, disaster was inevitable. Emily's heart raced, but her mind was clear. There was only one course of action: disarm the devices before Blake could complete his plan. She moved methodically from vehicle to vehicle, carefully disconnecting the triggers Blake had installed, her hands precise despite the pounding of adrenaline through her veins. The devices were more sophisticated than she had anticipated. Multiple triggers, interconnected circuits designed to detonate under speed, vibration, or tampering. Emily's experience as a mechanic, combined with her understanding of military-grade vehicles, gave her the edge. She worked tirelessly, silent and invisible, the night air thick with anticipation. Suddenly, a faint sound made her freeze. Blake had stopped, turning in her direction. Emily's heart leaped. She ducked lower, pressing herself against the Humvee, holding her breath as he scanned the area. His eyes lingered on a vehicle she had just disarmed. He frowned, suspicious, and Emily felt a chill. This confrontation could happen at any moment. Blake's gaze shifted, and he moved away, muttering under his breath. Emily exhaled quietly, tension leaving her body in a rush. She couldn't linger. The convoy's departure was imminent, and she needed to finish her work before the soldiers arrived. Carefully, she completed the disarming process on the last vehicle, securing every fuel line, wire, and detonator she could find. Her body ached, her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. Lives depended on her vigilance. By the time she finished, the first hints of dawn were coloring the desert sky. Emily took a moment to steady herself, wiping sweat and grime from her face. The convoy was now safe, but the saboteur Blake remained at large. He had intended to kill, to sabotage, and to cover his tracks, and she had prevented it, but she knew this confrontation was far from over. Emily's thoughts raced. She couldn't alert command immediately. Blake was cunning and would likely flee or accelerate his plan if he suspected they were onto him. She needed to trap him, gather irrefutable evidence, and act decisively. And she had to do it alone, for now. The base began to stir as soldiers prepared for the convoy, unaware of the catastrophe that had been narrowly avoided. Emily moved among the vehicles one last time, checking her work, ensuring every truck and Humvee was mission-ready. Her hands were bruised, her uniform smeared with grease and sweat, but she didn't stop. She silently vowed that not a single soldier would be harmed on her watch. As the first convoy members approached, Emily blended into the background, her expression calm, almost casual. No one suspected the battle that had just unfolded in the shadows of the motor pool. No one saw the courage and vigilance that had kept them alive. She had saved them all, and the most dangerous enemy was not in the desert outside, but within their own ranks. Emily Carter, the quiet mechanic, had uncovered betrayal, disarmed multiple bombs, and prevented a massacre. And though she was exhausted, she knew the war was far from over. Sergeant Blake remained a threat, clever and resourceful, and the next few hours could be critical. Every step she took, every decision she made, would determine whether her squad would survive. She clenched her fists, determination hardening in her chest. She wasn't just a mechanic anymore. Tonight, she had become the guardian, the protector, and the silent hero of Bagram Air Base. And when Blake made his next move, she would be ready. The desert night was heavy, a deep indigo sky overhead, dotted with distant stars that seemed oblivious to the tension below. Bagram Air Base had grown eerily quiet, the usual chatter of soldiers replaced by the low hum of generators and the soft whistle of the wind across the sandy terrain. Emily Carter moved cautiously among the convoy vehicles, her flashlight cutting precise lines through the darkness. Tonight, she wasn't just a mechanic. She was a sentinel, guardian, and perhaps the only thing standing between life and catastrophe. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the last Humvee on the convoy list. Weeks of tampered vehicles, careful observations, and sleepless nights had led to this moment. Every shadow seemed to move with purpose. Every sound was amplified in the stillness. Emily knew Blake was close. She could feel it in her bones. He was a careful predator, methodical and ruthless, and he wasn't going to make mistakes. She crouched low, her fingers skimming over the panels and wiring she had previously inspected. Nothing out of place, for now. But instinct screamed that she wasn't alone. A faint noise, almost imperceptible, drew her gaze to the shadows beyond the vehicles. Blake emerged, moving deliberately, his eyes scanning the convoy with a predator's focus. The sight of him sent a chill down Emily's spine, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had anticipated this confrontation. She had trained for moments like this, even if she hadn't known it. "Sergeant Carter." Blake's voice was low, a dangerous edge beneath his calm exterior. "I knew you'd be meddling." Emily didn't respond immediately. She stayed crouched, calculating, weighing her options. She had no weapon but her tools, no backup in sight. And yet, she couldn't allow him to complete his plan. "Blake," she said evenly, keeping her voice steady. "Stop. I know what you're doing. Leave now, and no one gets hurt." Blake's laugh was soft but menacing. "You've been very clever," he said. "Too clever for your own good. But cleverness won't save anyone here tonight." His hand rested on a concealed device in his pocket, a remote trigger, likely for the remaining vehicles. Emily's pulse quickened. One wrong move, and the convoy would be a death trap. She dove instinctively behind the nearest Humvee, wrench in hand, the metal cold and grounding in her grasp. Blake lunged forward, moving with surprising speed, but Emily's preparation gave her an edge. She swung the wrench with precision, striking his forearm and causing him to stumble. Sparks flew from the metal as it collided with his equipment. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Blake recovered quickly, snarling, and lunged again. Emily rolled, narrowly avoiding his grasp, her mind racing. She had faced danger in the mechanical world, in engines failing mid-convoy, in delicate wiring and systems under stress, but never like this. This was personal, direct, and deadly. Yet she refused to falter. Her hands found another panel, and with a swift motion, she ripped wires from the detonator Blake held. He growled in frustration, regaining his balance and striking toward her again. Emily dodged, ducking beneath his arm, and swung her wrench, this time striking the side of his shoulder. Blake stumbled, gritting his teeth. She seized the moment, leaping toward the remaining devices under the Humvee, cutting wires and securing triggers with deft precision. Her adrenaline-fueled focus made every movement exact, every action calculated. Seconds felt like hours as the fight continued. Blake attempted to grab her, his strength formidable, but Emily's agility and intimate knowledge of the vehicles gave her the advantage. She ducked under his swing, struck with the wrench, and then moved to the detonator embedded in the engine bay. Her hands worked frantically, fingers tracing wires and circuits, disconnecting triggers before Blake could react. Finally, Blake lunged toward her, fury in his eyes. Emily dodged once more, then grabbed a loose metal rod and swung it, knocking the detonator from his hand. Sparks flew as it hit the concrete, harmless now, rendered inert by her skill and determination. Blake fell back, stumbling, enraged and disbelieving. You won't stop this, he spat, scrambling to recover. I already have, Emily said, her voice calm, almost eerily so. You underestimated me. That's your mistake. Her exhaustion was almost overwhelming, sweat dripping from her face, muscles trembling from hours of tension and work, adrenaline coursing through every nerve. Yet her mind remained sharp. She had anticipated his moves, neutralized the devices, and now held the evidence of his betrayal. But she couldn't relax yet. Blake was still dangerous. From the shadows, reinforcement arrived, other soldiers drawn by the noise and commotion. Captain Morales, alerted by subtle disturbances in the convoy schedule, appeared with 2 guards. Blake realized he was cornered, and his bravado faltered. He raised his hands, his face twisted with frustration and fury. Emily stepped forward, holding the wrench like a silent warning. You're done, Blake, she said firmly. No one else is getting hurt tonight. The captain motioned, and Blake was restrained, cuffed, and led away. Emily exhaled, relief flooding through her in a wave that made her knees weak. She had done it. She had stopped him, prevented the sabotage, and saved her squad alone, under the cover of darkness, with nothing but her wits, skill, and courage. The convoy, now safe, was ready to depart at dawn. Soldiers went about their routines, unaware of the disaster they had been narrowly avoided. Emily's uniform was smeared with dirt, grease, and sweat, but she barely noticed. She had faced betrayal, danger, and death, and emerged victorious. Captain Morales approached, his expression a mix of awe and respect. Sergeant Carter, he said quietly, you just saved lives that could have been lost. Not just today, but for the next missions as well. Your courage, your focus. It's remarkable. Emily nodded, exhausted but resolute. It wasn't just courage, she said softly. It was preparation, awareness, and knowing what was at stake. That's all any of us can do. The captain studied her, then gave a small, approving nod. You've proven that heroism doesn't always come from the battlefield. Sometimes it comes from those who work quietly behind the scenes, unseen, until the moment they're needed most. Emily allowed herself a brief smile. She had done her duty, saved lives, and uncovered the betrayal within her ranks. But she knew the danger hadn't entirely passed. There would always be threats, sabotage, and unforeseen challenges. What mattered was vigilance, courage, and the resolve to act when it counted most. As the sun rose over the desert horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emily stood among the convoy, exhausted but triumphant. She had faced the saboteur, neutralized the threat, and proved that even the quietest, most unassuming individuals could become heroes when the moment demanded it. Tonight, Bagram Air Base had been saved by a mechanic, a quiet, determined woman who had refused to look away. Emily Carter, the unsung hero, had stepped into the role destiny had placed before her, and she had not faltered. The desert wind whispered around her as she surveyed the convoy, reflecting on the magnitude of what had occurred. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for now, she allowed herself a moment of calm. The squad was safe. The threat was neutralized. And Emily, the woman once invisible behind her tools and vehicles, had earned her place as the protector of lives. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Bagram Air Base, glinting off polished Humvees and dusty MRAPs. Soldiers moved briskly, preparing for the day's missions. But there was a subtle change in the air. A sense of relief, tension eased, though no one fully understood why. Emily Carter walked among the vehicles, exhausted but alert, her uniform smeared with grime, sweat, and traces of the night's desperate struggle. The events of the past few nights had left her physically drained, but emotionally alive. She had disarmed bombs, uncovered a saboteur, and prevented disaster, all alone, with nothing but her knowledge, instincts, and courage. The adrenaline that had kept her going now ebbed, leaving a mixture of relief and quiet exhaustion. For the first time in hours, Emily allowed herself to reflect on what had happened. Captain Morales approached, flanked by senior officers and security personnel. His expression was serious, but held an unmistakable note of admiration. "Sergeant Carter," he began, his voice steady, "your actions over the past several nights have prevented a catastrophe that could have claimed countless lives. We owe you more than words can convey." Emily shook her head slightly, brushing dirt from her uniform. "It was just doing my job, sir," she said quietly, almost dismissively. Yet she felt the weight of their acknowledgement, pressing gently against her conscience. "Doing your job?" Morales repeated, a hint of incredulity in his tone. "What you did went far beyond that. You acted decisively, courageously, and with extraordinary skill. You saved the convoy. You saved the base. And you exposed a threat from within our ranks, a betrayal that could have gone unnoticed." Emily's mind flickered to Blake, the sergeant she had trusted, whose betrayal had nearly destroyed everything. The sting of that deception still burned, but she kept her expression neutral, focused. She had prevented him from harming anyone, but the emotional weight of knowing someone she had worked alongside was capable of such malicious intent was heavy. "Sergeant Blake is now in custody," Morales continued. "We will conduct a full investigation and ensure accountability. But your vigilance, Sergeant Carter, has reminded us all of the importance of awareness and courage, even from those who work quietly behind the scenes." Emily allowed herself a small nod. "Thank you, sir," she said. She didn't seek praise, medals, or recognition. The lives of the soldiers had been enough motivation. Yet hearing Morales acknowledge her actions, seeing the respect in his eyes, gave her a strange, quiet satisfaction. Word of her heroism began to spread through the base. Soldiers she had worked alongside for months approached her, offering quiet nods, small smiles, and murmured thanks. Emily had never sought attention. She preferred the solitude of her work, the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. But now, the recognition was unavoidable. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that her courage had inspired others. In the days that followed, Emily was formally commended. A ceremony was held, small but significant, where she was publicly recognized for her actions. Her superiors praised her technical expertise, courage under pressure, and unwavering vigilance. Soldiers and officers alike looked at her differently, not just as a mechanic, but as someone who had stepped up when everything hung in the balance. Yet alongside the recognition came reflection. Emily found herself thinking about the moments she had faced Blake, the adrenaline, the fear, and the isolation. She realized that heroism wasn't about glory or accolades. It was about stepping into danger when others couldn't, taking responsibility when lives depended on it, and facing betrayal with calm resolve. In her quiet moments, Emily replayed the events in her mind. The hum of generators, the shadows of the desert night, the sudden spark of confrontation, it all lingered. She felt the emotional weight of the trust she had been given, the responsibility she had carried alone. And she understood, more deeply than ever, that courage often manifests not in grand gestures, but in the quiet, precise, and unwavering decisions made when no one is watching. The squad she had protected began to view her differently. Soldiers she had trained with, joked with, and relied upon now approached her for guidance and advice. Emily, once the quiet mechanic in the background, became a source of mentorship and inspiration. She didn't take this lightly. She knew the importance of her role, not just in machinery, but in morale, trust, and the safety of the base. But the experience also left scars. The betrayal of Blake lingered, a reminder that danger could come from within. Emily struggled with trust, careful to observe, to question, and to verify. Yet she also recognized that fear could not paralyze her. She had learned that courage meant confronting danger, uncertainty, and betrayal without hesitation, and that vigilance required constant awareness, even in moments of peace. Over time, Emily's role evolved. She continued her mechanical duties, but with a new sense of purpose and recognition. She trained others in safety protocols, vehicle inspections, and the subtle signs of tampering. Her experience became a lesson for the entire base, that vigilance, courage, and expertise could prevent disasters before they struck. Emily also found quiet moments to reflect personally. She thought of her brother Daniel, whose memory had fueled her resolve. She thought of the soldiers she had protected and the ones who might never know her name. And she thought of herself, a mechanic who had stepped into a role far greater than she had ever imagined. Though physically exhausted, Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The recognition, the ceremonies, and the gratitude of her fellow soldiers were significant. But the true reward was the knowledge that she had made a difference, that her skill, courage, and quick thinking had preserved life. As the sun rose higher over Bagram Air Base, casting golden light across the convoy and vehicles she had safeguarded, Emily felt a quiet pride. The desert, once a backdrop to her routine work, now bore witness to her heroism. She understood that her life had changed, not because of accolades or recognition, but because she had proven, first to herself, that courage, vigilance, and determination could change the course of events, even in the face of betrayal and danger. Emily Carter, the quiet mechanic, the unassuming soldier, the silent guardian, had become more than she ever expected. She had faced darkness, confronted betrayal, and emerged not just victorious, but steadfast in her purpose. And though she returned to her work each day with humility, she carried within her a profound understanding of her own strength, resilience, and the impact of her actions. The base was safe, the convoy prepared, and the soldiers secure, thanks to one woman who refused to look away when danger threatened. Emily Carter's story became an enduring lesson that heroes often work quietly, act decisively, and protect without recognition. Yet their courage leaves an indelible mark on everyone whose lives they touch. As Emily walked through the motor pool, sunlight warming her face and dust settling around her boots, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, reflect, and appreciate the quiet triumph of having stood firm when it mattered most. She was a mechanic, a soldier, a protector, and now she had become a symbol of unwavering courage in the face of insidious danger. Weeks had passed since the night Emily Carter had uncovered the sabotage at Bagram Air Base. The desert sun rose steadily over the convoy yards, painting the vehicles in shades of gold and copper. Life at the base had returned to a semblance of routine, yet beneath the surface, things had shifted. Soldiers moved with a new sense of vigilance. Officers reviewed protocols with greater scrutiny, and Emily herself had become an unspoken symbol of courage and precision. Emily walked among the rows of Humvees and MRAPs, checking engines, reviewing maintenance logs, and inspecting subtle signs of wear and tampering. What had once been routine now carried added significance. Every check, every adjustment, was a reminder of the lives that hung in the balance during those tense nights. She had prevented disaster, and now she treated her duties with a reverence born of first-hand knowledge of how fragile safety could be. Her thoughts drifted to Sergeant Blake, whose betrayal had nearly cost the convoy their lives. Blake had been transferred to military custody, facing a court-martial for attempted sabotage, conspiracy, and endangering personnel. His actions had sent shockwaves through the base, shaking trust to its core. Emily had been called to testify, providing detailed evidence, surveillance documentation, and meticulous notes she had kept during her investigations. Her testimony was pivotal, laying bare the careful, premeditated nature of his actions. During the hearings, Emily sat with quiet resolve, recounting the moments she had discovered and disarmed each device, the methods she had used to protect the convoy, and the calculated precision Blake had applied in his sabotage. Officers, investigators, and legal representatives listened with rapt attention, understanding for the first time the enormity of her actions. Her calm demeanor, combined with the weight of her evidence, ensured that justice would be served and that Blake's betrayal would have consequences. As the hearings concluded and Blake's fate was sealed, Emily returned to her routine duties, but something had changed within her. She no longer saw herself as just a mechanic. She had become a guardian, a figure whose knowledge, vigilance, and courage had saved lives and strengthened the entire base. Her colleagues, once casual companions in everyday work, now looked to her for guidance, advice, and reassurance. The base commander called a private meeting with Emily, offering words of thanks and acknowledgement. "Sergeant Carter," he said solemnly, "your actions went far beyond duty. You have set a standard for courage, vigilance, and selflessness that will be remembered here for years to come. Your skills saved lives, and your bravery prevented tragedy. The entire base owes you a debt." Emily nodded, quietly accepting the acknowledgement. She had never sought glory or recognition. She had acted because it was the right thing to do. Yet hearing these words gave her a sense of closure, a recognition that the sacrifices and sleepless nights had not been in vain. Her heart swelled not with pride, but with the calm satisfaction of knowing she had fulfilled her responsibility. In the weeks that followed, Emily began mentoring new mechanics and soldiers, teaching them not only the technical skills necessary for maintaining vehicles, but also the importance of observation, vigilance, and quick decision-making under pressure. She shared lessons about identifying subtle signs of tampering, about trusting instincts, and about the moral responsibility to act when lives were at stake. Her teachings extended beyond mechanics. They encompassed integrity, courage, and the quiet strength that comes from doing what is right, even when no one is watching. Emily's story became a quiet legend within the base. Soldiers shared the tale of the night she had discovered Blake's sabotage, disarmed multiple devices, and prevented a massacre, often emphasizing her meticulous attention to detail and her unwavering courage. Parents of soldiers writing home began hearing of her deeds. The tale traveled beyond the base, illustrating how heroism could emerge from the most unassuming places. Despite the accolades and growing recognition, Emily remained humble. She continued her work with the same quiet dedication she always had. But there was a new depth to her presence, a gravitas born from having faced betrayal, life-threatening danger, and the weight of responsibility. She had seen the fragility of trust and the strength of vigilance, and she carried these lessons forward, shaping every decision she made. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the motor pool, Emily stood beside the convoy vehicles she had safeguarded. Soldiers passed by, greeting her with nods of respect. Some paused, offering quiet words of thanks, recognizing the life-saving efforts that had preserved their safety. Emily smiled faintly, a sense of peace settling over her. She had acted decisively, protected her squad, and ensured that justice had been served. Her thoughts returned to the night of confrontation, the hum of generators, the shadows, Blake's fury, and the tension that had gripped every muscle in her body. The memory was vivid, but no longer paralyzing. She had faced danger and emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable than she had ever imagined. The experience had tested her courage, honed her instincts, and revealed the depth of her resilience. As night fell, Emily walked past the rows of vehicles, flashlight in hand, performing her final checks before the convoy's evening departure. The base was quiet, the air filled with a sense of order restored, but Emily knew that vigilance was never complete. Danger could emerge from anywhere, at any time. Yet she felt ready. She had faced it before, and she had survived. The legacy of that night, and the actions that followed, extended beyond the vehicles and the convoy. Emily had shown that heroism didn't always require a battlefield. It required awareness, courage, and the willingness to act decisively when lives hung in the balance. Her quiet determination, once unnoticed, had now become an enduring symbol for those around her. A reminder that bravery could emerge in unexpected places, and that even the most unassuming individuals could change the course of events. In the months that followed, Emily continued her duties, trained new personnel, and oversaw maintenance with unwavering precision. Her colleagues trusted her implicitly, and her story inspired others to act with vigilance, integrity, and courage. She had become more than a mechanic. She was a protector, a mentor, and a symbol of unwavering dedication to the lives of others. As she walked through the base at dawn, the golden sunlight spilling across the desert landscape, Emily Carter paused to look at the convoy. Each vehicle gleamed in the light, a silent testament to the countless lives she had safeguarded. The desert wind whispered around her, carrying the weight of challenges faced, battles won, and lives preserved. She allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection, a deep breath that acknowledged both exhaustion and triumph. Emily had done more than maintain machinery. She had confronted betrayal, faced mortal danger, and saved countless lives. She had stepped into a role far greater than she had ever imagined. A hero not born of circumstance, but of courage, skill, and determination. And though her work would continue, day after day, the legacy of her actions would endure, etched in the memory of the base, the soldiers she protected, and the lives she had changed forever. As the sun rose higher over Bagram Air Base, Emily walked on, tools in hand, determination in her heart, and a quiet sense of fulfillment guiding her steps. She had proven that heroes come in all forms, even those who work silently behind the scenes, who act without expectation of reward, and who stand firm when the world's safety depends on their vigilance. Emily Carter, the quiet mechanic, the unassuming soldier, the guardian of lives, had saved her squad, confronted betrayal, and left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of everyone she had protected. And as the base stirred to life, she knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would be ready, vigilant, courageous, and unyielding in the face of danger. Her story, once hidden in the shadows of the motor pool, had become a legend, and it would inspire others for years to come.